Hi, and welcome to Cooking with Kids. I'm Sarah, the Children Youth Services Librarian here at the Spruce Grove Public Library. In this program, you're going to meet my family, my husband Dave, and my kids, Sutherland, Montgomery, Oswald, and Theodora. Cooking with kids can sometimes be a crazy experience, but the memories they make and the hands-on learning that they take away from being involved in food prep and build a foundation for healthy eating habits. So more tips and suggestions for this can be found at Canada's Food Guide online. So enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, today we're going to make some soup, and in particular meatball soup. Soup is one of those things that you can basically throw anything you want in and it usually comes out alright. As with everything cooking, you kind of got to prioritize what takes the longest amount first. So for our purposes, we're going to cook our meatballs first and then we're going to get our soup on the go. If you're making, that's because we're using chicken broth. If you're making broth from scratch, that usually takes about an hour, hour and a half to do. And so that would be the thing you would do first. And then the other thing you decide is what ingredients you're going to use. I like to always just look through the fridge, see what vegetables we have, see if we have any leftover other food. Today we had some leftover rice, so we're going to use some rice in it. So we don't have to cook the grain itself in the soup. If you're using potatoes, those only take usually about 15 minutes to soften up. The one that would change kind of priorities here is if you decide to use barley. Barley or quinoa, they take a little bit longer to cook and soften up. So usually to start your soup off, you would fry that in the bottom of the pan a little bit with some butter for a few minutes, and then you'd add your broth to it because they take about 45 minutes to cook. This is Monty. He's my helper today. Say hi, Monty. Meatballs for soup are a little bit different than what I'd make for, say, spaghetti and meat sauce, or spaghetti meatballs. You can use ground pork or ground beef. Today we're using beef. Most of the time for this recipe I actually use pork, but beef is what we had on thought, so that's where we're at. The other thing that would be different from these meatballs is I don't tend to add any filler, so any breading or anything else that usually sucks up a lot of the juices when you're making spaghetti and meatballs. You know, some people like to add panko or just some breadcrumbs, some grated stale bread, whatever you want, maybe even just a little flour. But because it's going to be sitting in soup, we don't want it sucking up all that broth, so we're just going to go strictly with meat and a little bit of onions and some seasoning. So we got our meat in the bowl here. We're going to put a little bit of onions in it. I am going to put a little bit of onion in the soup, so I'll save aside a little bit of that. But first things we do, pick your knife. I tend to like one that's a little bit broader, kind of a chef's knife, because it's nice for chopping and giving yourself support so you don't, nick a finger or something. When it comes to onions, there's a million different theories or old wives' tales about how to cut them and not be crying. I've yet to find one that works. I basically cry every time. So we're going to cut it in half. One of the ways that people say sometimes to stop it from having you cry so much is to leave the root end on. So we'll try that. See how it works. So next thing you're going to do is you're just going to slice vertically, kind of across the onion. You don't want to go all the way through. You want to stay back a little bit so that it holds it for you so it doesn't slide around and go everywhere. So we're going to hold it, keep your fingertips in so you don't slice them. Alright, so there you see it's all kind of attached still, so now it's not going to run away on you when you're chopping. And notice I'm using my knuckles to guide the knife. So after you're done slicing the majority of it here, you're going to have this little bit left over, and you just chop that one up into little pieces. Alright, so it depends on how picky your kids are, and if they really don't like eating onions and little bits of, even though they add great flavor to everything. You could throw them through a little food processor or your handy dandy magic bullet or whatever you have in your house, and basically make them so small the kids don't see them. So we're going to put them in there. As per usual, I'm crying, so yay onions. Biggest thing is don't rub them or else it really hurts. So just saying. And that's almost enough onion. We'll cut this one up too, add a little bit into it, and then we'll save the rest for in our broth. Both myself and Monty here are crying, so doing well. So you hold your fingers like that, right? And then you place the blade here, and you kind of slice. You don't just push. Okay, now you move your fingers a little more. There you go. Okay, perfect. So we'll add a little bit more to our meatballs. Not too much, or else they won't really stick together. We'll save that for in our broth. Okay. So next thing we're going to do is season. I cheat a little bit. I tend to just use a little bit of Italian seasoning, which is like oregano, bay leaves, a little bit of pepper, basil, that kind of stuff. So you can either add a little bit individually or just sprinkle a little in. And the other one I like probably a lot more than my wife wants me to is Montreal steak spice. All it is pepper, some onion, dried garlic, things like that. So I usually sprinkle a little bit of that in as well. Want to help squish it all together? Okay, hop up. Okay, get your hands in there, squish her all. Alright, so here we have our meat, all kind of smushed in with the onions here. And now we're going to make some meatballs. You make them however big you like, whatever size you want. However big. What do you think? Is that big enough? Smaller? Do you like little meatballs or do you like a little bit bigger ones?
Bigger.
Okay, we'll go a little bit bigger. Whatever you do, try to make them an even size so that they cook evenly. So here we have our meatballs. We're going to cook them, flip them, cook them. Make sure they're half decent inside, and then we'll get going on the soup. Alright, so you want to warm up your frying pan, and you don't need to add any grease because there's a lot of oil that'll come out of ground beef and ground pork. So I'd say turn it up a little bit higher than medium temperature on the oven or on the stove top, as me personally I like them a little bit crispier instead of just kind of cooked and that's it. So. And that's kind of done handling the meat, so you're going to want to wash your hands so that you're not spreading meat germs all over the place. And then we'll end up using a pair of tongs to flip the meatballs. So here we are, our meatballs are all done. If they're a little bit under, it's not the end of the world, as they're going to end up in soup that's boiling, so they'll finish cooking there, but try to get them most of the way done. So we're going to take those off, and we're going to go straight to the soup. So actually what I like to do right off the bat is add a little butter or margarine into the pot, and then those little bits of onions that we had cooked earlier, we're going to actually throw those in here to brown, add some flavor. So we're going to fry the onions up a little bit here, get them nice and soft, and then we'll add the broth. Alright, now the onions are browned, I'm going to add some broth. Instead we're going to have chicken broth here. So it depends on how much soup you want to make. We're making kind of enough for a full meal and then a little bit of leftover. I tend to like it for in my lunches the next day. So, and there's lots of different ways you can make soup. It can be a very fast experience, or it can be kind of a several-hour thing. Like I said, if you're making your broth from scratch, then it's going to take you a bit longer. But we're going to kind of do it a quicker method. The full cook on this is probably going to be about 20, maybe 25 minutes tops. So we're just turning that up a little hotter, getting it to warm up. We're going to go cut our vegetables and get those ready to add. In our soup today, the thing that technically is going to take the longest is the carrots. The carrots take about 15 minutes to cook to where they're soft but not squishy. And that's where I kind of like them. If you're making your own broth, you would have had carrots in basically since square one, so they would be adding flavor to the carrots and they'll be a bit mushy, but that's all right. But for our quick one here that we're doing today, don't need that. So celery is always a good one to add. Adds a lot of nice flavor to soup. One of the nicest things I like to use in soup, or of the celery in the soup, is the kind of the innards of the head. All the little leafy bits, the ends here. I'm going to trim them off just a little bit, top and tail. and then we're going to chop them up. So this is another one of those spots where if your kids really don't like celery or onions and things like that, like I said, throw it through a food processor, or just chop them really, really finely so they don't even notice they're there, as they will love the flavor. Can you do me a favor, Monty, and just kind of chop those a little bit smaller? Just kind of push down on them, okay? Yeah, hold it there. And yeah, you can hold it from the top of the blade here. And just kind of push down on pieces to make them a little smaller. Here's a bigger bit. Beautiful. Alright, that looks good. Okay, now we're going to chop up our carrots. Looks like our broth is getting nice and warm there, so I'm going to throw the celery in the pot as it can cook as much as possible. And I'm actually going to throw those meatballs in right away. And any of the little bits of onion or anything else that fell off, just push that right in there, as it all adds flavor. Something else I like to add to a little bit of the broth at this stage is a little bit of that Italian seasoning. And for the final seasoning, kind of a little bit of salt or pepper, I save that to the very end, as you have to think about how a little bit of saltiness will come out of the meat and other flavors kind of come into it. So usually save the last seasoning for the end. So with most of my veggies that I put in soups and cook with in general, I tend not to peel them. That probably goes against a few things you've been taught or told by somebody at some point. But I don't really see the point. Wash them, keep it simple, and just chop them up and use them. So we're going to top and tail them. And then we're going to just try to cut them so that they're all about the right size, or the same size. So as long as your carrots aren't too giant, you don't have to slice them down. You can just go like this. About a 1/4 inch thick. Whatever the size, as long as they're even. Alright, Monty, you want to keep cutting? Alright. And at this point, the only other ingredient we really have is our rice that we're going to put in. If you like to add a little bit of potato, then that's fine. They take about a similar cook time as the carrots, so about that 15 minutes. The leftover rice here we have is already cooked. We don't really have to do too much to it, so we'll throw it in probably for the last 5 minutes of the cook, and that's about it. So here we are getting to the very end of the carrot. If your kids are helping and they're doing lots of good chopping, that's cool. If they're having an issue at the very end here because it kind of rolls around too much and they're getting kind of close to their fingers, something you can do is just put a flat side on things. By doing that, it's a very stable thing, and then you don't have to really have your hands on it as much. And for our recipe, we'll do 2 carrots. Alright, our pot's on medium heat here, and I'm going to add some carrots. Like I said, they take about 15 minutes. We'll set the timer for 10 minutes, and then when that happens, then we'll add our rice. And then, looks like it's coming along quite nicely. Like I said, we're going to add our leftover rice here. It's going to be maybe 5 minutes, if that. It's just basically warming up, is all. So you just decide how much you want. And so in a few minutes, we'll double check the carrots, because that's kind of what we're waiting on now. And make sure they're kind of the tenderness we want. And then we'll be ready to serve it here. Check our seasoning now that our time is up and our carrots are the right texture. I'm going to add a little bit of pepper and a little bit of salt, as it depends on what you're using for broth. So if you've got it seasoned already, or if you have some low sodium, I tend to salt mostly for flavor, so stir that up. Give it one more minute and then we'll serve it up. So here we have it. Our soup is done. Like I said, my view on soup is that it should be simple and basically use up stuff in your fridge. So say you want to do it a little quicker and you don't want to do meatballs, got a little leftover chicken, leftover roast beef, that type of thing, just throw that in instead. It's just a great way to use up leftover food, and it's nice and hot and tasty. And we like to serve it up with usually a bun or a dinner roll, maybe some crackers, whatever you want.
Thank you for watching Cooking with Kids, brought to you by the Spruce Grove Public Library. We hope that you enjoyed this recipe and are inspired to try it yourself at home. To celebrate this new virtual program, we will be hosting a Kids Kitchen Challenge. We're asking the young chefs of Spruce Grove to send us a photo of them preparing a family favorite recipe or any recipe of your choice. All participants will be entered into the grand prize draw. More details can be found on our library website at sgpl.ca/programs/kitchen-challenge. New videos will drop here on Facebook every 2 weeks throughout the fall, so join us again soon for more tasty makes. Stay safe and have fun in the kitchen.